Hey guys, it's Danny. Short video today, hopefully. We're gonna talk about orchid roots. Recently, one of my viewers asked me why some roots on their orchids are thin and others are thick. And if I remember correctly, my viewer had both thin roots and thick roots on the very same orchid, or two orchids of the same species, not entirely sure. Alrighty, to answer this question really fast, I would relate this to a stress situation or a lack of energy. The things are kind of connected. The more you stress an orchid, the less energy it actually has to produce functional and well-developed structures. But I would like to extend it a little bit more just to eliminate some other possibilities from the way. So first of all, you need to know that the specific orchid you have might naturally have thin roots, and you expecting it to create thick roots is just impossible for that particular orchid. Now, usually size matters. The bigger the orchid is, the thicker the roots it will have. It's a generalization, and it's pretty logical. The bigger an orchid is, the heavier it is. It will need more water and more nutrients, but also it will need to be stabilized properly on the surface it's growing. Whether it's soil for terrestrial orchids or a tree for epiphytic orchids, the roots must have a large enough surface of attaching or anchoring the orchid very well on its surface. The heavier it is, the taller it is, it will be more top heavy, the more the roots need to be thicker simply for anchoring purposes, but also for nutrition and hydration. As I was saying, it's not a strict rule, but you will find Oncidium orchids that do look considerably big, which have quite thin roots. Expecting very thick roots from these orchids is simply impossible because they're just not genetically programmed to produce thick roots. They do, however, produce a lot of roots that provide enough surface of anchoring and also enough surface of water absorbing to hydrate and to maintain the entirety of the orchid and its weight. And then you can have quite tiny orchids with incredibly thick roots. Now, this is a little bit misleading. The orchid I'm showing you is a seedling. It's quite a tiny seedling. At maturity, this orchid is considerably large. This is an Angraecum type. So the roots of this orchid are naturally thick because they need to sustain the orchid at maturity. But while it's a seedling, as you can see, the roots look pretty disproportional in my opinion. They look very thick, even though this orchid, just to give you a size, it's yay big. It's quite tiny. Now, in my opinion, the appearance of thin roots on orchids which are supposed to have quite thick roots is a sign of stress. And I have an example here to show you. This is an orchid that I received this summer. It didn't have any root system. It struggled to create this new growth, which is considerably tinier than the previous growths, and now it is growing one growth that looks a lot better than the other one. But the most interesting thing is the roots. So as you can see, this is an older root coming from the other growth. You can see how thin it is. But if we take a look at the roots the new growth is producing, you can see quite the difference. Hopefully you can see the root here. It is twice as thick as the older root. Now, this orchid naturally has thicker roots, but the fact that it created a thin root is just a result of the stress period this orchid went through a couple of months ago. When it comes to Phalaenopsis orchids, things can be quite strange. So on this Phalaenopsis, you can see I have roots that are thick, and then they go thin, and then they go thick again. Now, this is a different type of stress, if you want to call it like that. I presume this is a lack of moisture. At some point, things were kind of dry in my greenhouse. Now that winter is here, temperatures are low, humidity is pretty high, and yet again, the roots have started to become thick again because they simply have what to absorb from the air. So in this case, I think it's more to do with humidity than anything else. This will not necessarily apply to all orchids, but I do believe humidity is one of the factors that can influence the thickness of the roots, particularly when you have a root that seems to be thick in some sections and quite thin in other sections. This can be a little bit of dehydration or just simply the fact that the orchid did not have enough energy to produce a thick root at that section, but then it regained energy and it produced a thicker root. And Phalaenopsis are pretty known to do that. I don't have many other orchids that do this, but Phalaenopsis, since they create quite large root systems, aerial roots that I can easily observe, I find this pretty common. And maybe one way to resolve this is to spray the roots daily or every few days, or to increase humidity around the orchid. This doesn't mean the orchid is sick necessarily. It might mean a certain type of stress, which is not necessarily lethal. The most important thing is, of course, the orchid herself. If the leaves look good, if the other roots are growing okay and they don't stop growing, everything is fine. It just happens from time to time, and in this case, I suspect it is a lack of humidity. So overall, you need to know the particularities of your orchid. It might just be that type of orchid which has thin roots naturally. But if you observe thin roots and then also thick roots, it might just be a period of stress, or it might be a current stress in your environment. A current stress will manifest in other ways as well, such as dehydration of the leaves or other things. But if your orchid just started to produce thick roots, then I think you're on the right track. I think it's a good sign. And overall, a well-treated orchid, which includes a well-fed orchid, will produce structures that reach their maximum capabilities, and thick roots is one of them. So thank you for sending in this question. I hope you enjoyed this video. See, short and painless. So if you have other questions, do let me know down below. I might talk about them in a different video if I have something to say or to show you. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for daily orchids and plants videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, thanks for watching once again, and I'll see you next time. Bye! By the way, one of my viewers suggested that I do something about the white balance in my settings, because I had my exposure on automatic. When I had the white gloves, you guys couldn't see details, and I totally agree. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. It was an incentive for me to figure out how to do this, and let me show you. I think I can do this like here. See? I now know how to set the balance of my camera. Right now it is an overcast day, so if I do this and go really close to an orchid, I can definitely show you details. Bad thing is I will have more noise in the picture, but I hope not a lot. And yeah, sorry for the bad exposures of the previous videos, but I think now it will be fixed.